Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hi, you're very welcome. This is Reading the Past and I'm Dr. Cat. So I keep a list of suggestions for future videos from the comment section of my YouTube and other social media. Some of these suggestions stay on the list for longer than others as I figure out how I can best approach them. I think, and we'll soon find out, that inspiration has struck in relation to a suggestion from quite a while ago. I was asked whether people in the past were able to recognise their monarch, and if so, how. When I first saw this suggestion, it was a real head scratch for me in terms of how I should approach it. But, as I said, I think I've thought of a way in. So, let's go. When it comes to gazing upon the faces of monarchs from the past, or at least the flattering versions created by the artists of their day, we are rather spoilt. Even if we don't have the opportunity to see the portraits of monarchs in person, in galleries, museums or private collections, almost all the known paintings exist online, via the websites of the institutions that hold them, and almost as often through Wikimedia Commons. There's even a few examples that only exist online. Usually they've been scanned from an older book, and their physical whereabouts, rather than their digital ones, are now unknown. Through these portraits, we may fancy ourselves able to come face to face, even eye to eye, with all manner of ruler, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the saints and the tyrants, the peacemakers and the warmongers. And certainly, these images would also have been gazed upon by the subjects of those depicted within them, at least by a very select few. For much of the history of the portraiture of monarchy, the only people in a position to view those portraits would almost certainly have been those who also spent time in the monarch's presence. These works adorned the gallery spaces of castles and palaces. The intended audience was those whose position in life allowed them to move through those spaces. And that's not to say that the royal portrait was never used to show people what a king, queen, prince or princess looked like, because they did serve this purpose as a tool for diplomacy. They could and would be sent to the rulers of other nations as a gift or as part of a marriage negotiation. They would, therefore, show people what a monarch looked like, or at least what they wanted to pretend they looked like. But the people seeing them in this context would be abroad rather than at home. For centuries, only a very select few, namely those born royal or noble, were in a position to consume this kind of work. Sarah Fletcher, writing for artuk.org in 2012, lays out the timeline for a shift in who could view works of art such as these. She states, "In the late 18th century, the public for art was largely restricted to two groups: highly educated connoisseurs and aspiring artists who would make copies as part of their training. Even these individuals could only view paintings at occasional auction house sales or, if they were suitably well connected, by securing an invitation to visit a royal or aristocratic private collection. The situation for the wider public had begun to improve with the founding of the Royal Academy in 1768, which supported the development of British artists and admitted a mix of social classes to its exhibitions. The British Museum had also opened in 1759, the world's oldest public museum, offering free admission to all studious and curious persons. However, tickets had to be requested in advance in writing, effectively ruling out the illiterate. And viewing was by way of a hurried tour conducted by an often begrudging curator. Admissions followed a similar pattern at Britain's first purpose-built public art gallery, Dulwich Picture Gallery, when it opened in 1817. It was not until the opening of the National Gallery in 1824 and its subsequent move to Trafalgar Square that casual art viewing became possible for the general public. So before 1824, at the very earliest, portraits may not have been the way that the majority of subjects would have been able to discover what their monarch looked like. However, the 1800s would see a seismic shift in the way the faces of monarchs could be captured and shared both at home and abroad. Photography. The first photographic portrait of Prince Albert dates from 1842. That's less than 2 decades after the opening of the National Gallery. Around 2 years later, Queen Victoria was photographed, and by the end of the decade, photographers, plural, were being commissioned to photograph the royal children, as well as to take more informal family pictures. These photographs were not intended for public consumption, and so for many years they stayed within the family. But as we all know, the taking and dissemination of photographs and later film footage of members of the royal family would not remain within royal control forever. But returning to our original question, before TMZ or the National Enquirer or photographs or public art galleries, how did people recognise their monarch? I think we can probably rule out portraiture as being of much use in this regard. So, what else was there? Almost every one of the British monarch subjects could have had a very portable, pocketable image of their monarch on their person at all times. The royal mints turned out the coinage of the realm, which to this day carries the face of the monarch on the head side of the coin. Once, these coins were struck in silver, hence pound sterling. It was, or at least should have been, a weighable pound of sterling silver. There were also coins struck in gold, but whatever the precious metal, there was once an expectation that the face value of a coin would match the value of the metal it contained. On occasion, this wasn't the case. The coinage could be debased, as it was during the reign of Henry VIII. I've got a video on that debasement which I will leave linked. Something that non-debased gold and silver coinage was able to facilitate was international trade. A pound of silver weighs the same in York as it does in Venice, and the merchant cares little which royal face or national insignia is on one side of it, unless of course there were rumours of a certain nation's coins being doubtful in their value. So, a strong, trustworthy coin could carry a monarch's image across the known world, their face forever tied to a currency that might even be the envy of other nations. There is certainly propaganda value in this, both at home and abroad. But did currency help people recognise the monarch in person? I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably not. Until relatively recently, the royal head on the currency was so undefined that I think someone would be hard-pressed to pick the person on the coin out of the lineup, even if they were the only one wearing a crown. So, arguably, portraiture is too exclusive and currency is too vague. What else do people have to help them identify their monarch if they happened upon them on a Tuesday in July, as a random example? Well, I think they are principally going to be reliant on the context in which they encounter the royal personage. I mean, if you've lined the streets to celebrate a royal marriage or a coronation, you're expecting to see your king and queen. You're on the lookout, and they might even be helpfully wearing a crown. But even if you happen to be by the roadside. As the monarch travelled on their summer progress with just a fashionable hat on their head, I think you might be able to use similar clues to identify them as royalty. In both celebratory procession and travelling progress, the monarch will be surrounded by an entourage. The monarch will have a place of prominence. Royal insignia and heraldry will flutter in flags, hang in pennants, and or flash from the liveries of the surrounding servants. The ruler will almost certainly be on horseback, and on a recognisably fine horse to boot. Failing that, they may be travelling in a litter or a carriage, probably also branded with the royal insignia and definitely looking as luxurious as possible. Put simply, you are highly unlikely to confuse it with a farmer's cart on the way to market. Their manner of dress may also signal who is the big boss. A system of control over the consumption of luxuries in England had begun to percolate in the 13th century. Eventually known as sumptuary laws, they would come to legislate who could eat or wear what, based upon their social position. So, a lowly knight attiring himself in the fabric reserved for a duke, or eating delicacies ordained for an earl, could expect to find those luxuries confiscated and or be forced to pay a fine. In addition to limiting who could own what, this legislation, I believe, is a signal that there was an expectation in the other direction too. At the very start of Henry VIII's reign, an act against the wearing of costly apparel was issued. Indeed, there would be a few of these issued during the reign, in 1510, 1514, 1515 and 1533. Near the start of the first of these, the 1510 one, it is proclaimed, "Be it ordained by the authority of this present Parliament, that no person of what estate, condition, or degree, that he be use in his apparel any cloth of gold of purple colour, of silk of purple colour, but only the King, the Queen, the King's mother, the King's children, the King's brothers and sisters, upon pain to forfeit the said apparel wherewith soever it be mixed, and for using the same to forfeit £20. The gold or silver in question in this purple cloth is the real precious metal that has been worked to such a fineness that it can be woven into the fabric. A royal person would be expected to distinguish himself as being set above. Displays of magnificence were part of the job, designed to maintain the social order as surely, I believe, as restricting those who were below the rank of baron from wearing cloth of gold or silver, or silk or cloth embroidered with gold or silver. So a royal person may be expected to dress in purple silk or purple cloth of gold or silver. So if you saw someone riding past you looking like a Quality Street, it's a fair guess that they are the monarch, or they're one of the monarch's closest relatives. As a final, last-ditch means of recognising your monarch in the flesh, you might be able to rely on one of your neighbours. Perhaps they served in the nearby duke's household when the monarch last visited. Maybe they even watched the coronation. If they had laid eyes on the king or queen before, then they could point them out to you. But would you get a good look? Not if you don't wish to be considered dangerously impertinent. As the monarch passes, your eyes will be downcast as you bow or curtsy your reverence. Hopefully, maybe, you'd find a way to sneak a subtle peek so that you can be the one to point them out for your neighbours next time. As long as they are still on the throne by then, of course. All this is to say, I believe the king or queen would be fairly easy to identify if they were dressed in their finery and travelling according to accepted precedents. If they decide to sneak into the alehouse clad in wool 3 hours later, I don't think you'd have a clue that it was them. But I don't know if that's just an issue or problem of the past. I would argue that there is evidence to suggest that even in a world of paparazzi photographers, we still identify the royals by context and dress rather than face. For example, it has been reported that when Prince William and Prince Harry were boys, Prince Harry begged his mother to be allowed to go on public transport. Julie, Princess Diana, her sons, and 3 members of security personnel went and got on the tube at South Kensington. They got off at Piccadilly. We're told they then boarded a bus towards Victoria and got off at Green Park. According to one of the security detail from that day, Prince Harry mimicked the bus conductor, who, after calling out each stop, added the sounds "parp parp, ring ring." When the little prince did the same, his mother was apparently mortified and apologised profusely. The conductor, for his part, was said to have enjoyed it. What is perhaps surprising, I think, is that despite being some of the most photographed people on earth, who were travelling with a security detail on one of the busiest tube routes, and who then drew attention to themselves on a London bus, it's reported that no one recognised the royals that were sitting right beside them. So, could it be that recognising the monarch is just not an easy feat, whether you are in the 12th century or the 21st? But what do you think? As always, I'm looking forward to reading your conversations in the comments section underneath this video. Or you can find me on social media. I'll leave links to the other places you can find me on the internet in my description box. Follow me over on some or all of them so we can continue this conversation and start some others. I do hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, why not share it with some friends? Please also let me know by hitting the thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel, and if you think you're subscribed, maybe have a little check now to make sure that YouTube hasn't mysteriously unsubscribed you. While you're there, checking, subscribing, maybe resubscribing, why not hit the bell icon beside the subscribe button so that YouTube tells you when I've next uploaded. I hope you can have a great day whatever you're doing, and I look forward to speaking to you all in my next video. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye for now.